Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to this rapid changeover. I'm still, Lori, I don't know how they do it, but we were just here in theater seating, and now we're having a wonderful lunch. And welcome to all of you who are joining us virtually by Zoom or YouTube or however you're doing it. To the DC Center for the University of Arizona for Outreach and Collaboration. We've been here since Sunday night. Many of us arrived Sunday night, maybe a few of you before that. And it's been just a spectacular week. And I want to thank everyone who's made this possible and for all of you for making the effort to come all the way out here. Back in 2018, when we were going through the strategic planning process, the University of Arizona looked to the future, and one of our core concepts driving our plan was the fact that we had a distinct opportunity to broaden our impact by bringing research and innovation together through expanded presence in strategic locations. Obviously, we started in Tucson, expanded to Phoenix, and the next site on this journey was right here in Washington, D.C. And as Regent Penley said last night, many of us walked through this space when, I don't know if when you come to the check-in desk, there's a door open and you can see inside a room that is not built out, shell space, if you will. And that's what this space looked like just a few years ago. So I'm incredibly grateful that we're actually having this event this week. We were scheduled to do this back in March of 2020, and we had to obviously delay. But this center is established to inform and convene leading experts from around the world. And you've seen that all this week. I've been incredibly impressed with the quality of the participants in the panel, and Joan and her team have put together an incredible panel for us today to learn from and enjoy in this space. We also, I'm repeating a lot of what we've been saying all week, staying on message. People ask, why are we doing this? What's the purpose? Well, we obviously want to be closer to the federal funding agencies here in DC. We've had long-time relationships, obviously, with NASA, with NSF, the NIH, Department of Defense. But this gives us a place to convene people and have these type of discussions. Obviously, last night we had an opportunity to host some of the Arizona federal delegation. They're busy, hopefully doing good work for the country, but it gives us an opportunity to be able to host them here, to expand our impact for the National Institute for Civil Discourse. We heard 3 hours worth yesterday from Keith and his team, and just an incredible list of people who spoke yesterday about very, very important topics. Also, the Udall Foundation, or the Udall Center, which has a long history of collaboration and working with the University of Arizona, has a DC office that will be co-located here in this space. And all of those things I think are really important. The one thing that really excites me is this is a space for our students who do internships here in various agencies, do study abroad programs with semesters in DC. And, it concerns Lisa Rolney every time I say this, but we need a building like ASU has. This is our start. but not only a building for programming and offices, but we also need to have reliable housing for our students who come to visit the DC area. So that'll be in the future, but this is a great start today. We're very excited to open this center and to celebrate all of the variety of topics that we've discussed so far this week. We couldn't do everything that the university is involved in. And if you like this week, keep coming back, because I look forward to many meetings for many years in this space. I think in November, there's going to be a whole week of health sciences, or a whole session devoted to the health sciences. And of course, all of you now have ideas about how you want to activate this space in the future. As a public land-grant research university in a state with 22 federally recognized Native nations, the University of Arizona has a clear responsibility as the land-grant AAU university. And not only a responsibility, but a commitment to partner with our Native nations in ways that honor their sovereignty and serve their students and their communities. The University of Arizona is committed to sustaining meaningful dialogue with Native nations and taking tangible steps to have a positive impact in the lives of Native students, faculty, and staff, and the communities and nations that they are a part of. It is in this context that the Native Nations Institute was formed in partnership with the Udall Center, and we're very proud and supportive of the work that they do, and you'll hear more about that once I stop talking, which will be now. So enjoy your lunch. Joan, thank you very much for bringing this program to us today.
Woo. Lonma is asquali umasosoyam yetzavalti. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Nepamansiyan matiwa no raivet ank no hopit no maswungwat. Pahanvewat, I gave you my Hopi name, which is Pamansi, and I'm named after my paternal clan, which is a water clan. So my name is water lily, or water flower, literally. And but I come from, we're a matrilineal society, and I come from the Masao clan, and we Hopis believe, I'm from the Hopi tribe, from the village of Old Oribe, and we believe we're in the fourth world. And when we came to this fourth world, we made a covenant with the Masao, who was the deity in this world, to take care of Mother Earth. And so a lot of our responsibilities are we have to deal with fire, because when our people first came, they could see a fire way out in the distance, and that's where they headed. So that's who I am. We are very glad to have you join us. Those of you in the room, those of you that are online, thank you so much. Before we get started, I do want to just acknowledge, do a couple of acknowledgments here. President Robbins already covered a lot of this, but I do want to say that, the university in itself is located on their Aboriginal homelands of the Tana Atem Nation. We also have the Pasquayaki tribe that is located on the western outskirts of Tucson. And here today, in what we now know as the city of Washington, D.C., this was originally homelands of the Piscataway peoples, and they cared and nurtured all of the rivers and the lands in this area. So just wanted to make sure that I recognize and acknowledge the lands that we're sitting on right now. Well, today, what we're going to be doing is, we've already gone through some of the welcome. I'm going to do some quick introductions of our panelists, but then we're going to take a quick look at U.S. Indian country. It's just going to be a snapshot, of things to do. We're going to then turn to our panelists, because I have three great panelists who are going to be joining us. I have some prepared questions off of some of the registration comments and questions that I received from all of you. And then we'll open it up for maybe about 15 minutes or so of open Q&A, and we'll do some closing reflections at the very end. We're hoping that we're going to do this in a very conversational method and not so formal. A lot of my work is out in the community, and they don't Native communities, and there's not a lot of formality out there. So you'll probably see that within me as we go forward here. I want to just quickly introduce our panelists, and they're not up at the front, but I'll do them. But I'll reintroduce them a little bit further. But we do have Chairman Azure, Jamie Azure, who is with chairman of the chairman of now I'm going here, chairman of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa in the state of North Dakota. He had planned to be here, but they have a great COVID program out there, and he was notified earlier this week that he had his assistant had been exposed to a positive COVID person. So he had to go get tested. He was negative and was preparing to leave his hometown to get on the plane, and then got another call and said now his daughter had been exposed. So he has been quarantined, but he is going to join us online. So just so you know why we don't have 3 panelists here. Our other panelists are many of you that are here from the University of Arizona know Levi Esquera, our Senior Vice President for Native American Advancement and Tribal Engagement. And then we are very happy that we were able to have Catherine Isom Claus join us. She is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs with the Department of Interior. So we'll hear a little bit more about their backgrounds in a bit, but they're going to be joining me today. I do want to just give you a little bit of background about the Native Nations Institute. We are a program within the Udall Center for Studies in Public Policy. We're based at Tucson, Arizona. We were co-founded in 2001 by not only the university, but the Udall Foundation. So this is an NNI, what we call it NNI, is an outgrowth of the Harvard Project on American Indian Economic Development. So we've been really happy that we are now celebrating our 20th year anniversary. So we have made it past all of those junctions. So very good. We are hoping, as you can see our vision and mission statements, we aspire to be that leading research, education, and outreach organization to help support all of the tribes. And our mission really is, it has a lot of words there, but our mission really is about strengthening Indigenous governance so that they can accomplish the goals that they want. And this is, the university has been able to help us move that forward. We have several programs where I'm not going to be talking a whole lot about these programs, but I did want to make you aware about them because I know we have potential partners out there and entities who want to work with tribal nations. But we have a whole department that deals with our staff that deal with research and policy analysis. It's headed up by Dr. Miriam Jorgensen. We continue the work that the Harvard Project on American Indian Development started when it looked at the research question about why are some tribes more successful in development than others. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we learned, but we look at a wide variety of topics today. It's all applied research. We do a lot of case study development based on what's working out in Indian country, but it might have to do with looking at child welfare laws and how the tribal government might be able to strengthen its authority over the future of our Native children. Or it could have to do with ethics, ethical issues that they're addressing at the governmental level. So we have a wide variety, and I encourage you to go to our website to take a look at what other kinds of projects we have out there under our publications outlet, our publications website. The other is we want to make sure that as we're doing this work out in Indian country, because we learn a lot from them, that we're bringing it back to them. So we have our education and our professional development program These are often credit and non-credit kinds of courses. We have a great program called January in Tucson, where there are 3-day courses and intensive 4.5 hours to learn about various topics having to do with tribal governance. We also have some online programs, of a wide number of programs there. We do quite a bit of work with youth because there's a lot of concern about gearing them up to become the next leaders of our indigenous nations. And then we share a lot of our resources out through some free databases out there, so you might want to take a look at those. And then we do quite a bit of work out in Indian country, and that's a lot of where I enjoy the time, working with tribal communities. These are usually customized fee-for-service arrangements that might be helping them to identify all of the different strategies, or maybe getting a newly elected term of council members to get together and make sure they're all on the same page, or having to do with their governmental form, their constitutions, and facilitating all of those difficult conversations with community citizens out there. So we do a lot of work in that area. All of the work we do is really it's on the foundation of the research that we've been doing. So we have found basically 5 key drivers to successful, if you want to, however a tribe defines it, of economic and community development. Basically, we've learned that tribes who are exercising practical self-rule, they're the ones that are making all of the major decisions, and where there's a lot of overlap that you'll hear with the government, but they're in the driver's seat, basically. They're backing them up with what we call capable governing institutions, making sure those laws are in place. There's neutral dispute resolution mechanisms that are in place. We also, there has to be what we call cultural match. We had a lot of governments that were imposed upon us that are foreign to us today, but now they're accepted today. And so matching up how we might have traditionally governed and what the remnants of that are to what the current and contemporary form of government is. And then always having the strategic orientation. Many of our nations have what they call 7 generations thinking. And so carrying that over to the governmental side and making sure that they're recognizing that those whatever happened to us 3 generations ago had that impact on us today, and then going forward, the decisions we make today are also going to have that impact on them. And then what we call public-spirited leadership, that elected leaders aren't the only ones who can affect change, that community can go in and do that. So we do a lot of work in that area, getting people to, and even youth to recognize that they don't have to wait for an elected leader to make change. They can maybe initiate some of these kinds of things. So that's what we found with that. We are going to take a quick look at U.S. Indian country. And I'm going to go over some of these slides really quickly. We're going to do a quick poll. And these are the questions that we're going to ask you. And we don't want anybody cheating out there or taking a snapshot of it and looking it up on your phone. So we're going to ask you to participate in a poll. It's a poll everywhere. So take out those phones that you have, and you can, oops, I'm sorry. Oh, what happened to, okay, it's ready to go. So this is the first question. So did everybody get the instructions? We might have, it's at the top. As soon as that sign goes off. And those of you that are online, we encourage you to participate. So if you go to 37607 and then type in the Arizona 2021, and then you'll get a response back saying that you're ready to go. So those of you who want to participate, have you gotten your response back? Yes, and Danielle, are the ones online, they're good to go? Okay. So the first question that we wanted to ask you, this is kind of just a little quick quiz. How many federally recognized tribes are there in the United States? So 22, 152, 232, 574. So let's see what the... So are we good to go, Danielle? Okay. So it looks like majority, 50% of you guys have said 574 federally recognized tribes. And you guys who answered D are correct. So great job, everybody. Let's go to the next one. How many Native Americans, including Alaska Natives, are there in the United States? 1.2 million, 9.7 million, 6.2 million. A, B, or C? Danielle, are we good? Okay, we got a good response. 63, the 63 thought 6.2, but the correct answer is actually 9.7 million. This is from the 2020 census, and these are not, what do they call them? It's not, they're made of more than, they can be Native Americans, American Indians, or Alaska Natives that are of more than one race. As an example, my grandchildren are half Hopi and half Hispanic, so they would be in that population there. So B is the correct answer. The next question is, how many millions of acres of native trust land are there in the United States? 10 million, 55.7 million, 200 million. Danielle, are we ready to go? Okay, all right. So those of you who answered B are actually correct, 55.7 million. But however, I'll have to tell you that this is a number that was from 1997, I believe. This number is hard to get. We have been trying all over. So Deputy Assistant Secretary, maybe you can help us update this number. But this is we know that there are many other Native nations who have one that have been added to the number of federally recognized tribes. There are Native nations who actually had to buy back their Aboriginal lands. And so now have converted it to what we call federal trust land. So now we're seeing those, we know that that number is higher. We just don't have a good count on what it is. We can't find it anywhere right now. Oops, that's not me. Okay, the next one is, how many states have more than 100,000 Native Americans living in them? Is it just the state of Arizona? Is it 9 states, 21 states, 50 states? Okay. All right, looks like we're ready to go. So the correct answer actually is B. 9 states have more than 100,000 members in there, and it's Arizona, California, New Mexico, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Texas, Washington. Okay, I keep on. All right, let's go to the next question. What percentage of Native Americans are urban Indians, not living on their reservations, but out in cities like DC and wherever it might be? So 10%, 25%, 71, or 86%? Okay, so it looks like C has the highest response there, and you guys are correct. The last, in the 2020 census, it actually was a little bit higher. It was 78%, almost 78. So it's gone down just a little bit. So, okay. And our last question. I think we're ready for our last question. What city has the most Native Americans by population? Is it New York City, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Arizona, Oklahoma City, or Anchorage, Alaska? Phoenix is in the running, Anchorage, tie. Okay, those of you who are in the 5% who answered New York City, you are correct. It has the largest amount of Native Americans there. And if you look at that listing, they're in their order of their Native American population. It's unbelievable. When I saw that statistics, I thought, that can't be true. But then I began to realize that there are a lot of natives there. So, okay. All right, so hopefully you had fun with that. So we're gonna go ahead and move back to a little bit more of our, we're gonna, actually, if you can switch it back to the PowerPoint. I hope you had fun with that little quiz there. Hopefully keep you awake. All right, so the next one that's gonna be coming up has to do with the state of Arizona. Because we do live there. We have, as the president mentioned, we have 22 Native nations that share geography with the state of Arizona, but they're all culturally diverse. We have about 353,000 that represent now about 77% of the Arizona's population. But look at all of those colored parcels of land there and how much land we control in the state of Arizona. It amounts to almost 28% of the land base. And on those lands, you're gonna find vast natural resources. You know, you'll find water, timber. Tribes have tons of water rights in the state of Arizona. Think about all the minerals and forest lands and everything like that. So you can see that in Arizona, you know, tribes really are a driving force. And, you know, it's always, and then in fact, you know, I'm always proud to say that our Arizona tribes are often leading some of these major initiatives at a national level. So anyway, that just gives you a quick glimpse of Arizona. I wanted to go over quickly terminology, tribes. You know, people always ask, you know, who are they? What are they? Legally, they view us as domestic dependent nations. We forgot the dependent, but we retain a lot of and exercise a lot of extensive powers of self-governance. People ask, what do you call yourselves? What's the appropriate term? I think I often say it's by generations. I grew up being called an American Indian. First, I was always Hopi. And then in general, I was an American Indian. But today, a lot of us, the culturally appropriate phrase is Native American. So you'll hear that with many folks. And then in the census, U.S. Census, you'll see us as AIAN, American Indian Alaska Native data. So you'll see that all over, largely in some of the federal government documents. If there's one thing that I want you to walk away with today is to recognize that tribal nations are sovereigns. We have a lot of rights and powers and authorities. In many cases, more than the states do, and equivalent to the nations within. I call all of those 574 tribes as nations within the United States. When you step onto our boundaries, you have to abide by our laws, just like we were going into Canada or we were going into Mexico. So we have quite a bit of power and authority, and I want you to walk away with that understanding, if nothing else, that if you can remember that from what I covered. And we have vast governments too. If you just look at the sign and look at some of the departments there, we have quite a bit of authority. When we look at what happened to us, because we were the original inhabitants of the United States before it became known as the United States, we have, unfortunately, a horrible past. There are a lot of colonial policies that impeded us. They displaced us, had us walk thousands of miles, you know, in the, you know, all temperatures of the year. They basically just destroyed our indigenous governance institutions and our authority and our ability to govern ourselves over these past centuries. So you can, you know, we just took a quick snapshot of some of the typical years, you know, the 1800s, we were being sent to boarding schools. There were federal policies that we had to be relocated. They were going to erase the Indian out of nest, but keep the man. You know, there was a lot of religious sectors that came onto our reservations to try and convert us. But I think the most damaging was the fact that we had to go to boarding schools, and we lost so much of our language, our culture, just our, you know, participating in ceremonies. And we even lost things like parenting skills, because our families, our parents were raised in boarding schools with actually army type style of conditions, military conditions. So we lost a lot of that in the 1800s. In 1935, the Indian Reorganization Act was formed, and these are my versions of this law. You talk to a lawyer and they're going to tell you, a history teacher, they're going to tell you a little bit of a very technical version, but these are the way I interpret what was done to us. In 1935, they're trying to, the federal government was wanting access to our land and all of our resources, and many of us our governmental forms were decentralized. We had lots of small bands and villages and lots of chiefs that they were having to deal with, and they wanted just to put us all together and basically be recognized. And we have a lot of reservations that are more than one tribe, and sometimes these tribes, you know, were very different from each other. They were maybe sometimes enemies, you know, in the past. So we had all of this happening to us, and basically tribes were given opportunity to decide if they wanted to follow a basic template of a government. So we had about 230 something tribes who accepted what they call this Indian Reorganization Act form of a government, which is very foreign to many of our traditional governing structures. And that's why there's a lot of what we see today. Around the 1960s, there was a lot of political activism that was occurring within Indian country. Our tribal citizens were fighting for our rights over our land, trying to reclaim what we had at federal level that allowed us to just begin to open that door. But around by the 1970s, I believe it's 1974, the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act was passed. And that to us is what opened the door for a small number of our tribes to say, we want to run those programs. Federal government, you don't understand us, so let us run the programs. We know better we know best what our needs are, and we think we can do a better job. So we had a lot of tribes take on those programs, and today you'll see versions of it now that their names have changed, but those are things that I think really open up that door for us to be able to exercise our sovereign rights a little bit more. It continued to expand in the 1980s to today, the present. We still have a lot of laws, you know, and Supreme Court decisions that impact all of us along the way, but you know, this is the basis of the change that was occurring. I wanted to tell you, give you just a quick snapshot of what's happening socioeconomically in Indian country. And if you can, I don't know where the pointer is on this. I'm afraid to press it. It might go wrong. There it is. Okay, good. If you look at this line here, this is parity. This is parity with the United States. So if you take per capita income, this was like about 40 or 45% of what the U.S., you know, we were behind 45% for what's parity with the U.S. And this one is the multiples of. So let's go to family poverty. We were experiencing in this period of 2010, 3 times the rate with the typical U.S. family out there. So we have a lot of work to be done. We have a lot of data. I would encourage you, if you're interested in it, to take a look at this book. It's called the U.S. Data Book, and it covered 1990 to 2000 census, and it has a lot of good comparative data in there that I hope you'll take time to look at. So with that information, you can see the challenge that Native nations have had moving forward. You know, that as tribal governments, they have a lot on their plate, just like a country has, in any country in the world. But there are, I think, some distinct differences with tribal governments in the fact that we want to maintain our religion, our culture, and our language to what extent we can. Some of us are having to reclaim it because we lost so much of it. So that's going to be important to us in all the decisions that get made. And so does protecting our political economy and our sovereignty. Those are always going to be in the back of their minds every time they make a decision. And they're going to look at the welfare of their people and their lands. They're going to think about the impact that it's going to have on different segments of their community, always trying to fight for making sure that they're going to be well cared for. Even with all of this, they do have quite a bit of powers and authorities. Just like a country, you can look at all of the rights there that we have. We get to decide who's a citizen of our nations, our governmental form, and they vary greatly across the United States. We get to control all of these things. We can create taxes, and we have had a small number of tribes and a growing number who are imposing fees, on Indian lands because they're trusts. We don't have the same taxing mechanism that we do have with private land, fee land. So you can see all of the powers that we have, and we're slowly beginning to adopt those things. But there's great diversity in our U.S. American Indians. When you meet any Native American, we're going to look different. We're going to dress different. We'll talk different, depending on where we come from. Same thing with our culture, our tradition, and our customary practices. Some of us, I'm blessed to come from a tribe where we still have all of our religious cycle in place. We don't have all of them in each of our 12 villages, but we have probably about 6 of them who still have the entire cycle in place today, and the religious leaders to go along with it. So you'll see the variations there to those that are trying to reclaim some of these things, and they're having to relearn from their tribal sisters to help them learn songs and origin stories and make the connects back to what was once their own history. The same thing happens in our language and our fluency rates. Because of the boarding school system, we lost so much of our language. And so you'll find in places where you would think that language fluency would be fairly high, they're actually pretty low. I had heard for the Navajo Nation, as an example, it was around 30-something%. But there are tribes, excuse me. Whoa, it's starting to get dry. Excuse me. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully that's going to wet my throat. But there are tribes that have created programs to help them learn back. They've been documenting orally the last speakers within their communities, trying to teach them the language all over again. The Choctaw Nation in Mississippi was one of the ones that have really invested quite a bit of money into it. And now I think they're running around 85% language fluency the last I had heard. Our land base is going to be different. We can have really small postage size reservations that you'll often find in California to huge ones like the Navajo Nation and the Tanahatam Nation, where they're, 1 to 2 million in size. So they might be checkerboarded with in tribal communities too, where one parcel of land is trust land, the next is fee land, or maybe BLM land, or whatever it might be. Our governments are very different as well. Over in, excuse me, over in the New Mexico, you'll find a lot of the pueblos there still have been able to retain their traditional form of governance, Cochiti Pueblo in particular. Last December, to call all the males into their plaza and ask them, do you still want to be governed under this form of what we know as Cochiti governance and religion? And the men last December said yes. So their top spiritual leader appointed their 4 officers, and they serve 1-year term. But the laws don't change. They have a lot of oral laws. None of that changes. Only the people change. They change every year. So they still have that structure in place. Many of us had to go to more modern and contemporary forms where we're modeled after the US Constitution, where typical Western style forms of government there. So a huge variation there. Our geography and natural resources are going to vary. You know, I come from 7,000 elevation, and we have lots of rocks and sand, blowing sand, fine sand. And others are blessed with hundreds of lakes, you know, depending on where they're at. How we approach economic and community development varies again. This is a photo from Hopi, and I'm sorry it's so blurry here, but you could see many of us still farm traditionally. And to those who take advantage of their location because they're next to huge populations, and for them, you know, taking advantage of that crowd makes a whole lot of sense for them. So when you work with Native governments, we often get asked, so how are they organized? This is gonna be a very common org chart that you're gonna see with a lot of tribes. There are some that are still in this mode where this executive branch is also, the legislative branch is also the executive branch. And sometimes the judicial branch at the appellate level, because they're the ones making those decisions. And you can see some of their powers and authorities here. Some nations are going to have that are larger, like my tribe, the Navajo Nation, the Tanata Nation in Arizona. We have governments there too that have their own system. Then many of us have traditional leadership that has to be taken into consideration. So if it's anything regarding the land and the resources, these entities are going to be involved. They may have advisory councils, whether it's on healthcare or maybe on COVID or whatever it might be. And many of them now have semi-independent commissions. They're usually tribal economic enterprises that are developed there. So you're going to find a great mix here. So when you do work with tribes, you have to figure out, you know, tell me how your tribe, and ask them, tell me how your tribe is structured so that I can best know where to go. In terms of decision makers, oftentimes people think that maybe if they've been working, have a great friendship with a staffer, that they might be able to start, for example, at the University of Arizona research project. Well, but what they have to recognize is there are protocols in place. So you have to start formally, go to the top, to the governing body. There are some nations where the smaller ones usually, where the elected officials, the chairs, the presidents, governors, or whatever their title is, might have quite a bit of authority to make decisions. So you got to find out who's in charge here. And then we also have some tribes where, I forgot to mention, we have a general council where the citizens, people of adult age, are called together and have a huge meeting, and they can make decisions. And I've seen some in California where they're making decisions on a $10,000 contract. So it just varies significantly across the board. You're often going to find religious, clan, village leaders involved, and then, of course, those informal decision makers. These are matriarchs, patriarchs out in the community who wield a lot of power that's, you know, and they're going to be advising and sharing and influencing people. And I just wanted to point out, you know, we have these both age brackets, you know, the elders as well as the youth. These youth are beginning to stand up and really make known their concerns to their elected leaders. And some of them are taking action on it, not all of them, but that's the group that we hope to be able to assist. Just some quick words about their priorities. We do a lot of work out in Indian country, and we ask them 2-3 questions. What in the future, you know, 20 years, or when your children or you have grandchildren, what kind of a community would you like? We ask them, what would you change? What would you keep? And then we ask them to finish the sentence. This just gives you a quick glimpse at the kinds of things that tribes are saying, you know, and it's been amazing to us that consistently, no matter the side of the country that we're on, they're talking about safety. They're talking about community feeling, buying, community decisions, everything in regards to that. educational opportunities, job opportunities. They want all of these kinds of things, but you can just see all of the words there. And so when you do the work out in Indian country, you have to really ask your question. Is what I'm working on going to align with what the community is working in? Because then you'll get the buy-in from them. You'll get their support. They'll work with you. You'll become equal partners rather than one being above the other. So a lot of times that's all we hear tribes ask that they're asking for. So what we're going to do is we are going to take a break because we want to ask our panelists. So how do we create these long-lasting partnerships? We're going to just take a 5-minute break, do a bio break. We're going to gives us time to get set up here, and then we'll start again.
From the chat. Is that normal?
Yeah,
People aren't
it's
chatting?
very
People aren't
normal.
doing anything?
Very
Okay.
normal. Yeah, but I mean, I could write something and just test it out. Yeah, I'll do that in a minute. Okay. So, Joan, it turns out that we're actually not going to mic you here because you're going to be moving around a little.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And this one, you just have to talk into it because they control the.
Oh, great. Okay. I'll find my questions now. I think so. Oh, I was trying to go through it fast. I had a minute left. Yay!
We just need to figure out.
Just point to it and I'll come and get you a chair or something, okay?
I think I'll be good. It's good for me to defend it a little bit.
You know, but
Okay.
it helps for the team to see if you're talking or
Okay.
not, but whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay.
What do you guys want to do?
Yeah.
Break a leg.
They explain the slight delay as well.
Yes, thank you for the reminder. Okay.
Cool. So just when you're interfacing with Zoom, just wait like a half second because there's a delayed Zoom feed in here. So just very brief, like take a deep breath. There you go. Yes.
All right. Are we going to start off with the chairman?
Yes,
And then- yeah,
we'll start
okay.
with him. Uh-huh.
Great. keep my mask on? Are we doing masks on?
I'm just gonna take it. I'm gonna take it off in a bit.
Okay.
Yeah. When we're ready. Oh. Okay. Oh. I forgot I had to use the mic. So I'm glad you're able to return back again. So I want to just start out by introducing more fully our panelists because they are great experts in the room. First, I want to introduce Chairman Azure. He is his name, and he can pronounce it better than I can. I'm probably going to butcher it, though here it's Kitasi Kinu, which means spotted elk, and he's a citizen and a current chairman of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. He served on the council since December 2016. And then he became chairman in January 2018. He was reelected with 69% of the vote and continues to strive for Native solidarity, economic development, and youth and elder advocacy. In April of 2019, he was unanimously elected as the chairman of the United Tribes North Dakota and United Tribes Technical College by his peers. So I want to introduce Chairman Azure. He's on the screen right now. And I'm going to then introduce our next panelist because we're going to do popcorn style here as we go forward. So our panelist at the end is Levi Esquera. He's the Senior Vice President of Native American Advancement and Tribal Engagement at the University of Arizona. He's a citizen and former chairman himself of the Chemehuevi Indian tribe. He currently serves, he continues to work with various Native nations, bringing UA resources to the tribes. Prior to this being employed, he was employed with the Alliance Bank Economic Policy Institute at Northern Arizona University. He served as chairman, and he actually was elected 3 additional terms on the tribal council. So he has a lot of really great tribal experience. And then he was instrumental in developing their Nuwuwi Economic Development Corporation, one of the things that I talked about. Our last panelist is going to be Catherine Isom Claus. She's the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs. She's a citizen of the Taos Pueblo in New Mexico, and was most recently Vice Chair of the National Indian Gaming Commission. She's previously served as Senior Counselor to the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs at the Department of Interior before taking on this role. She chaired interagency working groups on sacred sites and homelessness, and advising on gaming matters and tribal homelands restoration. So a lot of the land back information. And before she joined the federal government, Catherine provided legal advice and representation to tribal clients on a wide variety of federal Indian law and policy issues. She holds a bachelor's from Wellesley College and a Juris Doctorate from Columbia Law School. So those are our panelists. You can see the wealth of information that they have. So I have asked each of the 3 panelists to take about 5 minutes to reflect and answer this question. What I wanted them, as you've heard, that each of them can offers us a different perspective, particularly in the roles that they currently hold right now. So I wanted the panelists to share what you feel is most important for working with and building relations with Native nations. You heard my spiel, but now we'd like to hear it from the practitioners. So we're going to start out with Chairman Azure.
Well, hi, Joan. It's nice to be able to connect, even if it's remotely. I do apologize I can't be there, but you did a good job of explaining why. You know, to answer the question, it's actually a little difficult. You know, when you talked about 574 different federally recognized tribes, you know, that one thing you'll notice is that we all have the same macro issues, but it's the micro issues that make us unique. You know, we just need to move forward with having a personal relationship again, that open dialogue. You know, that's not always been there. It's been getting better. And even an example like this, you know, being here remotely, there's ways to communicate. There's ways to really identify on who a tribe is. It's like you said earlier. I mean, if you've seen Chairman Jamie Azure on this panel, and then the green-eyed, bearded chief shows up, then you might be a little bit surprised, because you always have that mindset of what people should be and what they should look like. But we're all different. Turtle Mountains, for instance, is a very small land base, but we have a very heavily populated tribal membership. So we have unique issues that we face, compared to a lot of other tribes. It's just that uniqueness. We really need to be able to have a personal relationship with all forms of government. Tribes themselves have to remember what sovereignty is, and sometimes we forget that. We forget the power of sovereignty. We forget we have the power with to be a nation within a nation with the right to govern ourselves. It just comes down to the uniqueness and understanding who we are.
Thank you very much, Chairman Azure. So why don't we go to Catherine next?
Thank you. And thank you, Chairman, for those points. I think those were very well said. I completely agree on the importance of recognizing the diversity of Native nations. There's just, a huge variation, as Joan was saying too in her presentation, coast to coast up to Alaska. There's, no one size fits all for any approach. It's just important to meet tribes where they are. And I guess one thing I'd like to highlight, though, as Joan mentioned, I have a background in gaming. So a lot of the times we see very productive partnerships with entities involved in the gaming world and tribal governments. For example, in sports betting, we see that a lot lately. Tribes may not have built up the in-house expertise on sports books. That's a very intensive industry. So partnerships can be very lucrative on both sides. So we do like to encourage that. And I'm happy that we're having this conversation today to help bring out those points. But I think an important point to keep in mind with that is that tribes don't approach this as a corporation in terms of providing benefits for shareholders. The benefits of tribal gaming specifically are for supporting the tribal government, supporting government programs, direct benefits to citizens. Sometimes it's a very different mindset to think about using those profits toward building a nation rather than just in a corporate way. So I guess I can stop there. I think these are great questions. I feel like I could go on for a long time.
Catherine, could you then expand a little bit about the role, the position that you have and the relationship that the Bureau of Indian Affairs has with tribal nations?
Sure. So my title is Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy and Economic Development. Very long title. In the office of the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs at the Department of the Interior. We, as all the federal government does, function as a trustee, upholding trust and treaty obligations to tribes. So a lot of times our role is, at times it can feel paternalistic, and we really try to avoid that, as Joan mentioned, with the history that we've dealt with. And we try every day to get past that and find ways to continue to bring our relationship with tribal governments into the modern age and recognize all of the capabilities and the sovereignty that tribes have. But a lot of times in the sort of economic development context, we might play a role in various approvals, both at the tribal level or with outside entities. We might be reviewing those kinds of agreements as well. So that's another thing to always keep in mind in dealing with tribal governments, is that the federal government often has a role in relationships that might not be evident in other kinds of corporate arrangements.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, so let's ask Levi. How would you respond to that question? So what do you think is most important for working with and building relations with Native nations?
Thanks, Joan. Just to build off what's been said, I think it's really true that every tribe's unique. So it's taking, I often interact with the president. I would say, hey, if we're going to work with tribes, we have to have patience. From patience comes respect. From respect comes trust. And sometimes, that might be over a dinner. Sometimes, it might take 2 to 3 or 4 years to get to that point. I remember interacting with Yavapai Prescott, right? Small tribe, but it took me 2 years of making phone calls before they actually took time to call me back, and then from there we start building our relationship. So it does take a lot of patience. You know, the other thing too is we had a reception here last night and I had 2 guests here, and one of the things that I really appreciated is the conversations that they had with the individuals here. So I always talk about listening and learning, but it's really listening with real intent and then having a dialogue. I think that's so important. I think you highlighted some of that as well, is that make sure that we look at the priorities of each of the tribal nations, right? And as opposed to saying this is our priorities, we need to find out what their priorities are, and then how can we assist them going forward in that regard. I mean, one of the reasons why I came to the university, right, is because just the resources that we have, you know, and President Robbins is always challenging Levi, how do we get those resources out to the tribes? So I'm grateful for that leadership of pushing, but I think that makes a big difference is understanding their tribes, the uniqueness, and then, you know, how do we meet their goals? Not our goals, but their goals.
And, you know, Levi, thank you for that. I think that that's what I hear too from communities that I work with, indigenous communities. They just they have their own plans. They don't have their own priorities, and they need to know what a partner can give to them to help them achieve those priorities that they have set. So yeah, so very well said. Okay, thank you very much. So in preparation for this workshop, we asked respondents, everybody who registered, to answer 3 questions. We asked them what kind of challenges that had they faced in their interactions with Native nations, and we got the whole range. You know, some had limited, some had quite a bit, and so a lot of folks were in the middle. We asked them what successes they've had in interactions with the Native nations, and we heard some comments about, you know, that they were starting out. Others had long-term, so they had a good sense of building a relationship with a tribe. But a lot of them were in that middle area of, you know, we'd like to know more. You know, how do we do this? And then then the last question was, we asked them what they might learn by the end of the session. And so what I've tried to do is consolidate those questions and the comments that were made into basically 2 more questions or 3 more questions here. And so I'd like the panelists to take no more than 2 minutes, you know, at the max, to answer the question, so we have enough time for each one of you to share. I always tell, when I have tribal leaders, I always tell them, you know, we're not here for an election campaign. We need to just answer the question going forward. So I think we're going to start with Catherine. We'll start with you. Okay, so several individuals expressed that due to the diversity of the tribes, it was often difficult to find the right strategies to initiate a relationship with a tribe, and then to earn their trust, as Levi was just talking about. So what suggestions would you offer?
Sure. And I think Levi had great suggestions on this already. I think it's really important to listen and have the patience that you mentioned. That's absolutely key. I think meeting tribes where they are in terms of actually on their homelands, I think is important, but also not jumping the gun on that. Building a relationship first, being invited there, and then actually going out and kind of experiencing what the community there is like and talking to people face to face. I think building relationships takes a long time, and a lot of it is listening very carefully. I don't mean to take your points here. I think you had it covered really well, but you know, that's one thing we try to do in the federal government a lot, is spend more time listening than talking, and making sure that we are absorbing that in a meaningful way and adjusting our actions accordingly. So I think it's something that it takes time, lots of respect and trust building.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So I just want to share this quick story. I know I only have 2 minutes, and I, you know, I always think, you know, take time to listen and to learn. But you know what, when you see yourself in certain opportunities, you gotta, I don't know if take advantage is, but really show who you are. So about 2 years ago, I was at San Carlos Apache Nation, and we happened to show up at the chairman's birthday. We didn't know, but we were there, and they actually had some pinyon soup, and they gave us a couple bowls, and, you know, I ate it, and it's a little bit oily for my taste, but you know what, I ate it, right? Because that's, and then there was these 2 elder ladies, and I said, hey, with permission, right? And I lifted up the bowl and I slurped it down, and they just giggled and laughed, and they're like, "Oh, you're one of us," you know. And I think, you know, we got to be true to ourselves. You know, I'm not telling all of you to go slurp soup, but I mean, when the opportunity comes, and if that's customary how you are, I mean, they didn't find it rude. I asked them for permission, but you know, that just shows you that, hey, I'm interested in you, and hey, I'm enjoying this, and I want you to know that, hey, I'm here for the long run. And I think that simple act really opened up. And these two elderly ladies, they were just, like I said, I never seen them giggle so hard, and just, they were just, yeah, you're one of us, Levi, you're one of us, you know. So I think there's opportunities when we listen and learn, but to be ourselves. And the other thing too is, you know, ask questions, and know that, you know, we're not perfect. Sometimes we might ask questions that might be offensive and all that, but as you learn, you'll understand that a little bit more.
And I think, you know, on the being offensive, trying to avoid being offensive, if you can just make statements that, you know, that I'd like to know a little bit more. If I ask a question that you would prefer not to answer, just let me know. You know, it's just conversational, you know, courtesy to be able to do those kinds of things. Okay, so Chairman Azure, what strategies do you have to offer?
I would build off of what was said before. You know, remember that uniqueness. Let's put yourself in our shoes. You know, it's hard to do when you don't know, you know, the group that you're working with. You know, a lot of us have survived the Termination Acts of the 1950s. All the way up to the 1970s, we were still waiting for the Religious Freedom Act, where we have one generation out, and a lot of our older generation here have a real distrust factor with any government. I mean, they were told less than 35 years ago that practicing our culture and our religions were still illegal, and you could be facing federal jail time for it. You know, you have to keep all those things in mind. You need to be able to ask those hard questions, be respectful, be able to put your mindset into our point of view, and be able to adapt and evolve that relationship. You know, and it all starts with open dialogue. And, you know, open dialogue gets us so far, but at the end of all that open dialogue, we really need to put some substance behind a lot of the great dialogue. And, you know, that's one of the issues that we face now. We're calling on substance. A lot of great points are made, a lot of great partnerships are forming, but at some point we need to put that substance behind the talks.
Thank you very much. We're going to get into some of those questions here. You know, building relationships takes a lot of time and effort. It's an investment, particularly of your time. So we're going to get to some of the efforts that maybe perhaps each of the three bodies that they represent might have undertaken. So we're going to start with Levi Esquera. Mr. Esquera, how could you, we had a couple of inquiries from the registrants asking about how the University of Arizona is building relationships with Arizona Native Nations, and how is the university sustaining them? So if you could talk a little bit more about that. Your position is new at the university. We've had a number of programs in existence for decades at the university. We've had some really great experiences in the past, some not so great ones. So now we have your position. So if you could share a little bit about what the university is doing today.
Thank you, Joan. So I'm happy to say I've been at the university for a year now. So this position is a little bit, it's not as new as what it once was, but I'm really grateful for the opportunity I have. I mean, I tell Jacqueline, who I work with, you know, there's sometimes I still pinch myself. I can't believe in the position I'm at and the opportunity I have to really to impact positive change or positive experience with our Native nations. Being a senior VP, I have an opportunity to engage with senior leadership, to meet with the president, other key staff members to push initiatives. And some of the things that we've done in the last year, we've had some challenges with COVID, but that hasn't slowed us down. We've had tribal leaders come in and speak to our senior leadership. And what's really been interesting is it's been by Zoom. And during those times, my chat box is blowing up, right? I mean, I'm getting questions. It's great, just the dialogue I see. The other thing I see, as the chairman mentioned, is you know what, you talk, you listen, you got to have some substance. You got to start building it. And so some of the things that we've done at the university beyond that is last week, and you heard about it on Monday, right, with the announcement of Indigenous Resilience Center, right? Just some of the things that we're doing to start addressing some of those challenges that the tribes have come forward with. And this is our response to it. Another thing we're actually working on is developing the School of Indigenous Governance and Development, because we're hearing from tribal nations, these are some of the things. And if we have those resources to provide to them, that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that, hey, we're listening and we're hearing what your solutions are, and we're going to make those solutions happen at the university level. Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
So another thing we're going to do is in October, we're going to have a tribal leader summit, and really happy. What we're going to do is we're starting to organize our summits around sport events, right? So we're going to invite the Washington tribes down when U of A plays Washington football. And also in November, we celebrate Native American Heritage Month. Our women's basketball program's kind of been set up for us to really highlight our work with our tribal communities. We're just waiting for the schedule to come out, and whatever game we pick, we're going to invite tribes from that region. Because I want you to know, wherever you go, in this country, you're going to find natives, right? And we want to open up the door, and it's not really my idea. I think this came from John Dudas. I don't know. I saw him here earlier. He was really pushing that. Hey, Levi, let's start thinking ourselves beyond the 22. And I also know that great learning comes from tribal nations meeting with one another, especially if they're not even from the same state, but just the opportunity to share, their experiences, things that they've had work well with universities, work well with the government, whether state or federal. And I think great learning takes place in that regard. And that's one of the things that I think we're gonna be doing a lot more at the university.
Thank you so much for that. And I can say that being a employee for 20 years at the university, I've seen a lot of changes within that. And I want to thank President Robbins and the senior vice presidents for supporting the establishment of this position. We have had so much of an elevation, and I can remember year after year we would say, we need more Native faculty, we need more support, we need access to all of the higher levels. And to have this position has just been really great for all of us at the programmatic level. It's just been fantastic. So I'm really proud of our university for taking that step, because sometimes we get envious of others that had already were a little ahead of us. So I wanted to ask, thank you very much for that, Levi. I wanted to ask Chairman Azure, like many Native nations, the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa has had a myriad of relationships with various levels of governments, from the municipals to the counties to the states and to the federal government, and probably other for-profit and nonprofit entities. Can you share an example of maybe a great relationship that has worked, and pick out, what made that particular great partnership happen? What made that work?
Well, let's not forget about the other sovereign nations also. We have 5 within the boundaries of North Dakota, and we all do a great job of working together to move forward. I would say one of the better examples are our emergency services here in the Turtle Mountains. Like I said, we are a small land base, but we have a lot of tribal members living on or right off reservation. We have 5 different townships that are right off of reservation that aren't on reservation land. there are good partnerships moving forward with any emergency that pops up. Now we're talking about what started with firefighters. We're working hard to get law enforcement MOAs in place. But in 2020, the pandemic really, brought out a lot of these great partnerships that we'd already had set in place. Again, even Arizona and the Native Nations Institute, all the case studies, just going back, there's a plan in place that's worked across Native Nation. You don't have to reinvent that wheel. You just keep finding those partnerships and you figure out how they've worked in the past. So we did that with our emergency services, especially our fire department, when we got into the pandemic. The Turner-Maltons have always prided ourselves on being good neighbors. I know we are a sovereign nation, but we made the decision that when we started our own tribal testing units, that we would share our data within the state, because we do have so many tribal members that live off reservation within our region. Those numbers and that sharing, working with the state government, was twofold. It was back and forth. If we had resources and we had data that would help the state of North Dakota and even the country in some aspects, we were more than willing to figure out how we were going to share that data so everybody was informed. But at the same time, we had a great working relationship with the state of North Dakota when we needed extra testing kits, when we needed the National Guard to come out and help us with a lot of our testing sites, and we would have community days where we were testing. So it's possible, and that was a result of, I would say, 4 years of good dialogue with the state of North Dakota. So you use that dialogue, and that's where you start putting the substance behind it. So we use that moving forward with a lot of our other issues. We tell our people it is possible, that you can be a partner, and you really stress that sovereignty portion of it and make sure that everybody knows, and with the state of North Dakota, with the county, and with this tribe, that we are a sovereign nation, and we will enter into agreements to work together for the betterment of everyone.
Thank you so much for that. I wanted to go ahead and I'll go to you.
Well, no, just building on what the chairman said, I want to give you an example of what the University of Arizona did. Pasquayaki, we have two tribes located there in the Tucson area, and one of the things is vaccines, right? They wanted us to store vaccine, and the first thought is, well, you could come to our pod and be vaccinated, and their leadership talked about, hey, the mistrust that's currently there. But what they really wanted was for us to store their vaccines, and we were able to work out agreement to store their vaccines and then, take it to them. So every Thursday. So, just when you talked about that, yeah, partnerships can be formed, and I know one of the things that the university has done this last year is we've taken PPE supplies out, I know there's 22 tribal nations within Arizona, and I think we've probably covered 8 or 9 of them. So we got about to half of them of taking, PPE supplies, because we know that we're in this together about being a good neighbor.
And I also wanted to add that across the country, these 474 Native nations out there really have, stepped up to the plate. I've heard many stories over and over again about how once we vaccinated tribal citizens, they opened up the access to non-Native citizens out there, those employees that were working on, not just working for their governments or their casinos, but just to the surrounding communities. Again, being this good neighbor and showing them that, we are all in this together and that we can depend on each other. So I've been really proud of that, to know that, when we were in a position to be able to help others, which isn't very often because we don't often have the resources, that we extended it out to others as well. So very, very thank you for all of that. We're going to go to Catherine. So I know that the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Department of Interior, you have thousands of employees that deal with all of these 574 federally recognized tribes, those that don't yet have federal recognition that are wanting to move into that area. And there's a lot of political turnover that occurs, because we serve 1, 2, 3, or 4-year terms. So you're always dealing with new leaders over and over again. So can you talk a little bit about maybe perhaps some of the new efforts that you've instituted in developing and sustaining these relationships, knowing all of those factors, where there's constant turnover? Can you share some of that?
Sure. I'll share a few things on that point. So you're right. We have a lot of employees all over the country. Within the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, we do have an Indian preference. So the vast majority of our employees are Native people themselves. So that really, gives us a lot of knowledge already to begin with. That's really helpful to us. So we have offices, throughout the country, also here in DC, where we have headquarters. And I think the front lines of those interactions are always with our folks on the ground. So we want to make sure that we build a culture that's respectful, that is always, like I mentioned earlier, meeting people where they are, showing respect for their homelands, for their traditions and protocols. And then from the headquarters side of things, we make sure we are looking at policies that help us to always raise the standard of how we as a federal government are dealing with tribes. So for example, the whole federal government right now is engaged in an effort to modernize our tribal consultation policies. So anytime the federal government takes an action that affects tribal interests, we have an obligation to consult with tribes first, and there's a set process we go through to do that. And so I think immediately when they got in the door, the Biden administration decided we're going to consult with tribes on that consultation policy and seek ways to make it better. So we are working really hard right now to try to incorporate all of that feedback and do updates within our policies, as well as all of the other federal agencies that have any dealings with tribes. So that's really a floor for us. We can always strive to do better than that, but that just makes sure we have set processes in place that we must adhere to whenever we're dealing with tribes. And since you mentioned your summit, I feel that I also must mention that we have a Tribal Nation Summit coming up in November. We've just announced. We don't have the agenda yet or anything, but we're really looking forward to that. That was also an Obama administration project, and then we're carrying it over into the Biden administration. It's been dormant for a few years, but usually it's in person. I think this year it's unfortunately going to be virtual just because of the COVID concerns. But it's a great opportunity in a lot of ways to bring together tribal leaders to talk with one another, to bring them here to talk with all the federal agencies. That large of a gathering really gets so much attention from the agencies that it creates all kinds of action to prepare for it. So it pushes cabinet secretaries to personally engage on these issues, to come speak directly to tribal leaders, which might not be a huge part of their mission, but it forces that kind of interaction. And I think they gain a lot from it. And I think that federal policy as a whole gains a lot from it as well. So.
And I know that there are many Native nations out there who are looking forward to that time again when we can all meet, yes, and that the agencies can begin to collaborate with each other to help meet some of their needs out there. So I know that they've been feeling the absence of it over the years. I wanted to make sure that we had enough time for some audience questions. We're winding down. We have about 10 minutes left, if that's correct. And so I don't know if we have any questions from online. So does anybody else want to have a question out there? And who has mics? Okay, if you would like to ask a question of the panelist, please raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you. No questions whatsoever. Oh, okay.
Kind of a challenge here. So I have a question. For those of you I don't know, my name is Laura Lopez Hoffman. I'm a colleague of Joan's at the Udall Center. It's a bit of a self-interested question for the panel. Joan and company are absolutely amazing. When I travel around the world and I say I'm from the Udall Center, they don't think of environmental research. They think of Native nations, because you guys are really the only outfit in the world that does what you do. And yet at U of A and within the state of Arizona and even within the United States, sometimes you receive less recognition than you have from around the world. So my question to the panelists is, what can we do to support the work that they do and to get the message out about how important it is, because there's no other outfit that's doing what Joan and company do.
Cool. Thank you very much for the question. Who would like to go first? Who would like to go first?
I think you're doing work with the chairman directly. Maybe that should be him.
Okay, Chairman, maybe do you want to start?
I'm actually trying to figure out if you planted that into the audience for that question, Joan, because I'm just kidding. It is important that we get out and we let people know how I was introduced to a Native Nations Institute in the Arizona state was Native Governance Center. So the word is out there, and it's very important work that's being done. And it goes back to what really struck me was the case study. You know, it shows everyone that there is a way to do what ails you in your communities or in your tribes. But I can't stress enough on how important it was that not only the successes are highlighted, but also a lot of the failures, so we don't fall into that same trap. I believe that Joan and her crew do a great job. They do a great job of what's the easiest way to say this? If you have they do a great job of adapting, and they're able to evolve and amend their presentations with those recommendations. So, you know, I just think we all need to get that word out. Social media is great. 2020, you know, it was a hard year for everyone, but one of the silver linings was the advancement in the digital age, in the technology age, with all of tribes and all of small communities across this country. So, you know, let's get out and let's share the great things that Arizona and Native Nations Institute are doing.
Thank you very much for that. Any other responses from any of the panelists before we?
I'll just say real quickly, and you're aware of this, Joan, we're looking at the School of Indigenous Governance,
Yes.
right? And that would greatly impact NNI and your work going forward. So I think that's one of the things that's under consideration at the university level.
Yeah, and just for folks out there, the Native Nations Institute is called a public service entity. We're not attached to an academic college, and so the School of Indigenous Governance and Development would be affiliated with our College of Law. We currently offer a master's in professional studies and governance through the Law College, but this would just allow us to expand upon our course offerings there, and then hopefully move our not-for-credit courses into credit-bearing courses as well too. So
Yeah.
we're looking forward to that. So we're really proud because we're our master's in professional studies and governance started in 2020, I believe it was. We had one student go through. Well, we had 7 enrolled in our program. One of them graduated. Our first graduate was in May. And now we have 12 that are currently enrolled in our master's program. So we're really happy, and we're hoping to expand upon it. But again, we're not an academic unit, so we have to partner with the College of Law.
Just to add to that, I mean, it's part of our strategic plan, right? It's in the
Yes.
pillar as well.
Yes.
And the other thing too is when I came on board, I think the very first month, I remember getting this email from Joan talking about, you know, this is our lifelong dream to see this happen, you know, and we're putting things into place to make it happen. You know, I can't guarantee it's going to happen, but we're moving in that direction. But I just remember your little email that just said, you know, this has been a lifelong dream, Levi. So hey, I take that serious.
Thank you very much. Yeah, when we first set up NNI, we said, you know, one of the things we'd like to do is be able to offer degree courses, you know, and offer a degree in Indigenous governance, and the school hopefully will get us there. So thank you very much for that. Anything else that anybody wants to add, or any other questions? Yes.
My name is Clarence Hall. I work for the Federal Emergency Management Agency as the education advisor, and I'm working primarily in the area of COVID-19. And my question to the panelists and to the chairman How can FEMA work better with the tribal nations to help them reach their goals, particularly with COVID-19 prevention and treatment work?
So how can FEMA better support the tribes? Any suggestions? Here's your opportunity to tell a federal agency what they'd like to have happen. Either one of you.
Okay, I mean, the chairman might have a better perspective on this, than me, but from my perspective, also within the federal government, I know we work regularly with FEMA and appreciate that support, because I think we're able to kind of share contacts and resources and make sure it's getting out to folks who need it. So, we just appreciate that you're thinking about it and trying to do the best that you are. I know this is a huge topic of interest for us throughout the whole federal government, and FEMA has the subject matter experts, so we appreciate that collaboration.
Chairman Azure or either Levi?
Well, here in the Turtle Mountains, I can say that we've had a great relationship with FEMA in the past. We haven't had to use that resource very much as some of the southern tribes may have, but FEMA and tribes kind of tie together, and we're kind of side by side. FEMA is a emergency response, and tribes are masters at adapting and taking on situations that come at us. So I would say the only issues that we would have with FEMA is just like with every other government organization is there's so much bureaucracy when it comes to working with tribes and so much red tape. If there's a way that we can start taking some of that red tape down and having those open conversations, and it goes back to that priority list, but I want to commend FEMA, and you've been great partners with this tribe.
Okay, well, maybe if you do think of other suggestions, I would encourage you to send them to Clarence Hall. I think that FEMA is really open to these suggestions about how to improve upon it. We had an opportunity to meet with their external affairs department yesterday, I believe it was, and they expressed similar views as well, that they're wanting to learn about how better to support tribes. So this is all very positive. We have one more last question that I want to make sure we address. One of our online participants asked or said, we are always looking for ways to have more Indigenous students and trainees learning and bringing their knowledge to what we do in DC. But being away from community can be hard. How do you navigate supporting students who want to support these opportunities? So we have a tribal perspective, an educational perspective, and then a governmental perspective. So maybe we can just weigh those in about a minute, and then we're going to get to some closing remarks and a closing slide.
Do you want me to start? Okay. Sure. That's a really good question. It's so hard. I mean, there's no good answer to this question. I think I've been in DC for 12 years. That's a really long time, I think, for most people. We have opportunities to fly back. We have a lot of flights out of DC is kind of the best I can say with getting back to your home communities. We try to, I think in DC, there is a network of Indian people here from, BIA to just other folks in DC. So, we have round dances, we have events, the universities here have powwows. So we try to do what we can to build sort of a pan-Indian kind of community here in DC. But it's a really hard question. I just think, supporting students as best you can is an ongoing process. But I appreciate the question behind that. It's a very important point.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I think it's really critical to build that community, right? When you're dealing with students, especially those who leave their communities, they want a sense of community wherever they go. And I think it's on us to provide those opportunities where, they have an opportunity to engage with like-mindedness, like people, I think that's critical for us to actually start looking at, how can we do those opportunities? I know the provost yesterday took one of my friends and she was, she's excited, right? She really wants to know what can we do to create more pride, more opportunities for our Native students. And I know she has some ideas, and it's like, that's great, because those are the directions we need to go to start building that sense of community, that sense of pride. Give you a shout out.
Chairman Azure?
Same thing, same thing as we've been talking about. We all have to work that higher education and really getting out and showcasing that, if we're going to make a difference, let's get people at that higher level, and let's make sure that, with digital age again, we can zoom back, we can talk to our grandparents, we can, have that community feel, but let's make sure that we have an open-mindedness of getting our culture out to outside areas. It's just this flag behind me. I mean, we get so many requests for just to have this flag with people that are going to college all across this country, or if they've got a new job in Denver to Texas, they ask for a flag. We send them a flag, and they send a letter back saying, it makes me feel good because I can look at our flag and it reminds me of home.
Thank you very much for all of those responses. I just wanted to just add very quickly that oftentimes we hear that from citizens that are living off reservation, that they want to have linkages back into their home communities. And we're always encouraging tribal communities to open up ways to do that, and even the students, because we do a lot of work with students, at telling them, when you have a paper to write it on a topic that's relevant to your own home community, and talk to your instructors about, the situations that you're encountering. Maybe there might be a project, an independent study project that you could do, and be able to have those linkages. And even once they're out of college, for people like all of us who live off reservation, to find ways to offer back our expertise back into our home communities. Oftentimes there aren't jobs for us to go back into. But that may be true, but we can create pathways nevertheless. So I look forward to that. So we have a couple of minutes, and then I need to cover a couple of slides. But does anybody have any last closing remarks before we move on?
I just wanted to add one more point to the question we were just talking about that your remarks made me think of. Is I think mentorship is a great way too to help folks feel more at home here in DC. I'm a lawyer by training, so I'm part of the Native American Bar Association. Every summer we have a mentorship program. So I've met lots of great people who are now all over, mostly not in DC, but people come and go a lot in DC. It's very transient, who are now colleagues or friends. And I think that building those kinds of networks, and I think academia supports that a lot too. That's really important and helps us build a community as well.
Thank you. Any last comments from any of our panelists? No? Chairman.
I think we have to remember also that we got to get out of that mindset that tribes are on reservations. Before reservations, tribes were roaming tribes. So we're just getting back to what we were before treaties and reservations were put in place. And 574 tribes were all different in our diversification, and we're all different in our economic development. But maybe we can all start moving forward to having satellite offices in some of these major cities and metros, not only in your region, but branching out a little bit. But that networking is absolutely valuable, and it's already being done.
Time. I think we have a little bit more time than I'm thinking. So I do want to go back to the panelists and see if you want to add a little bit more to anything that has been shared here today, because our audience is all interested in partnering with tribes.
I just have just a couple of thoughts that I want to say is, You mentioned the consultation policy. ABOR, we have a consultation policy at the university. We're actually adopting and building on our own as well. And one of the things is, I sent it out to 2 or 3 tribal leaders just to get their viewpoint. And one of the things that we're really looking in there is having a benefits and risk assessment. And what I tell people when they go to meet with tribes is, don't look at from your viewpoint, what are the benefits from that tribal nation? Because a lot of times they go in with their idea, and I think that creates an opportunity for them to listen. Another thing too that, just the vast of research that we do, every now and then I'll pull some of the people who have been awarded grants, and I talk to them about their succession plan, or how are you going to involve Native faculty or Native students? Because I think it's really critical at our universities to start building our capacity in all aspects, especially with some of the research that's going on. One of the things we did when I was at Chemehuevi is, when we would have contract employees, we always said, okay, what's your succession plan, 3 or 4 years? What are you going to do to actually work yourself out of a job, but actually hire a tribal member from within? And we've had some success with that. We've had some failures with it, but that's that mindset is, how can we continue to grow our capacity?
I did have a 4th question, but I want to make time for audience questions. So do we have any other questions that were online? No? Oh, yes? Okay. All right, let me check my phone here and see what it says. So hold on a second. But any from the audience? Any other questions that? Okay, so, oh, I'm sorry, we have one more here. Okay.
Hi, Janelle Biggs with the University of Arizona Federal Relations team. So I've worked closely with Trent Tigerstrom in the past, who runs our federally recognized tribal extension program. And I was wondering, from your perspectives, your thoughts on the program, first of all, and opportunities for growth with that program. We've been kind of talking about how we could kind of garner interest in that program from other states. It hasn't seen a lot of growth in past years, and we're very interested in this. So I just kind of want your perspectives on how that program has been helpful, and if you think that there are opportunities to grow that, and especially maybe for you, Catherine, but for everyone on the panel.
Okay, so the question is about the ag extension agents that are all across Indian country. So are there any, Chairman Azure, do you have any ag extension agents that work with your nation?
Oh, I'm sure we do, but at the top of my head, I can't place that particular position.
Do either one of you want to answer?
Maybe add in.
So, I know Trent's an amazing person. I still feel for everything he's going through at this time. But one of the things is I was actually in a meeting with the provost and Betsy, and we're talking about these extension offices. They're really assets, right? And you start looking at them, and we have them on 5 different, I think we have 5 on 5 different tribal lands and all that. And I've actually been out and visit with 2 of them, and it was like, how can we use this asset for more of the benefits for the tribe? And so what we're gearing up to do is, is it possible for us to actually start doing entrepreneurship and small business training run out of these extension offices, just because they're strategically located. We're gearing up, going after some funds for EDA to allow that to happen next year. But that's one of the goals is it's a great asset, but you're right, we need to maximize it as much as we can. And that's one of the areas that we're looking at actually doing, after getting some feedback from the tribe saying they would really benefit if we could actually provide that as well.
I'm not familiar with this program specifically, but I do think university extension programs are really helpful. I think one of our programs in the Office of Indian Economic Development deals with the university that is helping bring tribes together on tourism. So we have grants on tourism and kind of just sharing information. The university helps with best practices and how to bring people in who might not automatically reach the tribe, but broader audience. So I think universities can often play that role of reaching audiences that might not have thought about either doing business with tribes or visiting tribes. So to the extent you're involved in scholarship, I don't know if that's your program at all, but I just wanted to put a plug in that we are always passing around law review articles and other studies and different, publications of universities, and that really does help us with policymaking. So we appreciate that too.
I know that the Ag Extension program had quite a bit of work out in my own home communities over the years, and so I know they're very valuable. They offer valuable services. It's a matter of trying to find out how to reconnect them all into that, so that people then can say they are a value and we need to continue to fund them and expand the program, because I think that there are multiple ways to do that, and perhaps maybe with the new staff that are in the USDA, we might be able to make some headway in that area. We hopefully have some advocates in that office. I know that the program got extended by 15 minutes because we started 15 minutes late. I don't know how everyone's time is. So I think we might need to wrap up then. So it looks like it. Okay. So why don't we, I just have a couple of closing slides to just, I'm really happy that a lot of what I heard is also what I'm going to cover on these slides. If we can just a quick recap. We heard this a number of times. From all of our panelists. We have to understand the tribal government that you're working with. Go and do the research about them. Understanding the tribal community, because a lot of times the work that you're going to do is going to filter down to the individual citizens. Levi said this repeatedly. We got to understand the project's place in the tribe's vision. This is even a line. Acknowledging the sovereign status. We heard that from Chairman Azure. Having mutual respect for the political culture. You got to be patient. Levi talked about this. Patience, and it, and we have to do the same on our end. It goes both ways. And then forging that, not just a one-time, one project kind of a relationship with a tribe, but knowing that when you're going to enter into this partnership, we're looking at it for the long term. We want to build those relationships. That's normally how we do the work out in Indian country. Just some quick things to consider on an individual basis is abandoning your presumptions about who we are as a people. We tell our tribal leaders the same thing too on the other side. We're learning about the tribe and the community before you go in. For those tribes that are in Arizona, we have a great website that provides all of that information. I forget the website's name, but it's run by Claudia Nelson's Office of Technical People. I always forget his name. Native American Office of Native American NAPTA, Native American People's Technical Assistance Office, I believe is what its official name is. And then be open, accessible, and educate yourself, and be accountable. People in Indian country are going to judge you on your actions. We can say a lot of things, right? All the really nice things, but in the end, they're gonna watch and see, are you following through on what you said, to demonstrate whether or not there's that commitment. And just having general respect for one another, being honest, not promising the world of what we can do, but being honest, or even admitting, I don't know this information. I don't want to offend you. These are all things that you can do. And most of all, as I think that Levi has expressed this a number of times, be yourself. Because it's you that they're interacting with, and you're often representing that agency, and people are going to remember you, and it's going to be vice versa. Whomever you're interacting with is also going to be representing the nation, whether they realize it or not. So these go both ways. Just some quick things. You can find a lot of this information on our website. I encourage you to go to our tools and resources page. You can find a number of resources there. And a lot of what I shared at the very beginning is a part of a longer program that we call Understanding and Partnering with Native Nations, the Native Know-How seminar. And we really started this at the university with some seed money from one of our foundation funders, because they were talking about how we might be able to, as a fundee, how can we overcome some of the cultural differences? And so we decided to pull this together. And I had been my tribe's education director for 8 years. And I always used to say, oh my God, if only the state of Arizona would mandate that every teacher who gets certified to teach takes at least 1 3-hour course about the tribes within the state of Arizona, I would be so happy, because then we could overcome some of those issues that the teachers have once they're in the classrooms. And so this was really, the course is really, some seminars really a culmination of all of the work that the Native Nations Institute has done, the tribal work, what we've heard from tribes, our own experiences as staff, and our own perceptions. So we're not the experts in all of this field. You're going to hear, my version of it. Hopefully, you've heard 3 other perspectives today. So I hope that you'll think through these comments and be able to improve our relationships. And I wish you much luck in that. And I say askwali to you. That's a feminine way of saying thank you. And for those of you males, if I was a male, you would be saying I would be saying kwakwa. So askwali for your time. Thank you.